The issue with continuing was that the development of the proposed parks and promenades were dependent on whether or not there was proper zoning and funding that would allow this next phase of the project to be completed. The continued development on the riverfront was under a lot of contention, especially within the residential and land use phase. Reports surfaced that the riverfront planners would like to see an increase of 85% more industry and an increase in commercial use. This motion was opposed heavily by East End residents. Thomas Brush, a councilman and planning commission member, was quoted saying, "Up and down the river, it seems you see more and more chemical, grain, and petroleum storage areas. And with this zoning, we can expect that here as well, and I'm not sure that's appropriate." After 20 years, not much more progress has been made. Much of the controversy that held up the 1962 planning is due to the Planning Committee being committed to providing zoning for industry, but the original zoning plan calls for exclusive residential and recreation uses. On March 11, 1983, the Riverfront Advisory Council voted 6-5 to limit the proposed 85% increase of industry along the riverfront and uphold the 143% increase of recreational uses. After much debate, in March of 1990, city planners and developers met to discuss proposed housing developments around the riverfront. What started as a small meeting between officials turned into a shouting match between attending riverfront residents. The confrontation resulted from a presentation of proposals. The presentation peeved residents when they heard about the increase in high-income housing. Howard Beatty, a riverfront resident, had these choice words for the city officials: "We're going to stop it, just like we stopped it in 1975. In the early 1990s, Cincinnati put the renewal of the riverfront as its primary development project. But similar to the city's first attempt, this project was also delayed. This time, the controversy was caused by a different character, the Bengals. The city's football team was looking for a bigger home that would provide increased revenue, something that Riverfront Stadium, primarily designed for baseball, couldn't provide. In 1993, when Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, requested a new stadium to be funded by Cincinnati, he did not receive the positive reception he had hoped for. Mr. Brown then threatened to move the Bengals to another city, a similar move used by Ohio's Northern pro team, the Browns, who were controversially moved to Baltimore in a similar scenario. A move like this would not only affect the morale of the Cincinnati faithful, but also have negative consequences on the city's economics. In response to Mr. Brown's threatening comments, Hamilton County Commissioner Bob Bettinghouse prepared a tax proposal that would use resident tax dollars to cover the costs of 2 new stadiums and generate $100 million a year in revenue. The plan included selling off bonds to finance the construction of the stadiums, and they would repay them using sales tax revenue. The total cost for 2 new stadiums along the riverfront would cost $445 million. In 1995, citizens shot down the proposed tax deal with a petition on the grounds that it would not stimulate economic development or downtown revitalization. A referendum was eventually passed to assist the building of a new stadium. Once this was agreed upon, it still took 5 more years for construction to begin on the football stadium, again halting any further development of parks on the riverfront. This created further issues with the Reds. They too were due for a new stadium, but there were debates on the potential location, unsure if the riverfront could handle 2 stadiums. In November 1998, citizens ended the question of where the Reds' new ballpark would be built, voting to have it constructed along the riverfront. The approval of these new stadiums still did not cease the unrest of Cincinnati residents. The African American inner city communities grew restless of the city spending tax dollars on the stadiums instead of better schools and housing. The tensions reached their highest point when a white cop shot and killed an unarmed African American, resulting in race riots. Reverend Damon Lynch III, an active African American leader within Cincinnati, had the following to say about the problems facing Cincinnati. "We talk about the light rail, expanding the convention center, the 2012 Olympics, the Banks Riverfront development. Let's get real. We've got racial problems. We can build stadiums, but can we deal with our human relations? This was yet another setback for the Queen City. Going back to 1962, the original plan for the riverfront was to develop parks once the Riverfront Stadium was completed. In 2001, 39 years later, there was still no further development. Instead, there are two brand new stadiums. The Banks, a new riverfront development program initiative, is Cincinnati's most recent effort to finalize the empty promises made back in 1948. The plan was first conceptualized in 1996, and similar to the rest of Cincinnati development history, it was delayed due to the construction of sports stadiums. Ground did not break on the recreational parks until 2007. The new area that is being developed has shrunk considerably from the original 88 acres. It is now the space located between Paul Brown Stadium and Great American Ballpark. The project is estimated to be complete in 2018, nearly 70 years after the riverfront was decided to be fully developed, and nearly 80 years after the city was decimated by the Great Flood. Today, in 2011, all you see when you go down to the central riverfront is a big parking lot and a lot of construction. But Cincinnati still has hope in its riverfront.